Welcome back to Mr. Wicklam's Virtual Classroom, where today we're going to be continuing with our look at measurement. And what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at units of measurement, and more specifically looking at millimeters and centimeters. When you look at that word milli, so you guys are familiar with meters. You guys have seen the meter stick that we have up front by the chalkboard, by the whiteboards. When you break it down, you have milli. So milli is French and Latin for thousandth. Now when you use that word thousandth, that's not thousand, it is less than zero. And so what I mean by that is that if you have 1,000 millimeters, you get 1 meter. But 1 meter, on the flip side, 1 meter would equal decimal 001, or 1/1000th. Okay, so that's what 1,000th is. Okay, 1,000th is actually less than 0. So it takes 1,000 millimeters just to equal 1 meter. Okay, so if you look at the word cent or centi, for looking at centimeters, it's Latin for hundredth. And when we say hundredth, what we mean is that if you look at money, it takes 100 cents to equal $1. Well, that's the same with units of measurement. It takes 100 centimeters to equal 1 meter. So if you look at the meter stick at the whiteboard, and you look at the numbers on that meter stick, and it goes up from 0 to 100 because it takes 100 centimeters to equal that 1 meter. And so that's kind of an introduction as to what we're doing. So these units of measurement, they're actually quite small. And what I mean by that is that these units of measurement, you got the meter, but it takes 100 centimeters to equal that 1 meter. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at centimeters, and we're going to look at millimeters as well. When you look at centimeters, centimeters are used for measuring length or height. You can measure height with centimeters if it's a small structure. If it's something like the CN Tower, we're not going to measure that in centimeters. We're going to measure that in meters. But if it's something like a little snowball that you make outside that you may have made a couple days ago when it snowed, you may measure that in centimeters because it's not going to be a meter. Okay, so you got to know what you can measure in centimeters, what you can measure in meters. So centimeters is used for measuring length or height. I'm going to give you an example. I have a ruler here, and if you take a look at my ruler, there's centimeters. It's written on the bottom. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see those lines there. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure this. So this line here is actually 4, and then we go to in between 4 and 5. So we have 4.5 centimeters because it's 4.5. Okay, not quite 5. So each one of these little lines in between 4 and 5 equals decimal 1. Okay, because it's not 1 centimeter, it's a fraction of 1 centimeter, which means that it is 1/10. So every time we do that, that's a decimal. So we put a decimal in there. So we can measure the bottom. The bottom should be 4.5 as well because it is a rectangle, which it is. And we're going to measure the sides. And the side is, gotta get it bang on here, and the side is 2 centimeters, and this side should be 2 centimeters as well, which it is. Okay, so that's all we're doing. When it asks you to measure something, all we're doing is we're just taking our ruler and we're just measuring. That's it. That's all we're doing. We're just going to measure the sides. That's all it wants us to do. Okay? Really, that's about it. One other little thing. If you remember from last year, we said that our pinky finger is about 1 centimeter. So if you take your pinky finger, your small finger, and you place it on your ruler, you'll notice that it's about 1 centimeter. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an index, or a little bit of a standard in order to measure certain things, because it may ask you to measure certain things using your finger, right? Using your pinky finger, or your index finger, either or. Index finger or pinky finger is usually about 1 centimeter, and so it may ask you to do that. We're going to move on. We're going to move on into millimeters and centimeters, because this is kind of where the rubber hits the road. And what I mean by that is that we're going to have to do some converting. And when we do converting, what I mean is that we're going to take 1 centimeter and we're going to turn it into millimeters. Okay? So if I have 1 centimeter and I'm looking at my ruler, if you notice underneath the 1, I've written a 10. And the 10 is millimeters. So 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters. Okay, and then I'm going to draw the line. So let's draw a line for how far 1 centimeter is. There is 1 centimeter. It's not that big. Okay, it's also 10 millimeters. So each one of these little lines, which I said was decimal 1 centimeter, is actually 1 millimeter. So here's the thing. If we're going to use decimals, 2.3 centimeters equals how many millimeters? Well, we know that 2 is 20 millimeters. And like I said, each one of these, so that would be decimal 3 right there. Okay? 3 lines past the 2. 1, 2, 3. Well, I know that each one of these is 1 millimeter, so that's 21, 22. It'd be 23 millimeters. How do I find that out? Well, to change from centimeters to millimeters, I need to multiply by 10. Easy way. What is 10 times 1? 10 times 1 is 10. So if I multiply by 10, 10 times 1 gives me 10 millimeters. So when I want to switch from centimeters to millimeters, I want to multiply by 10. Same thing with decimals. If I multiply by 10, it would look something like this. 10 times 2.3. I'm going to have to kind of squish my calculation in here so that you can see it. So it's the same as 2-digit multiplication, guys. 2 times 3 is 0. 3 times 1 is 3. I add my 0 down at the bottom because I'm multiplying my tens or my ones, because I'm going to put a decimal in here. 2 times 0 is 0. And 2 times 1 is 2. And my answer is 23. So I end up getting, when I multiply 2.3 times 10, I get 23. So what simply happens is that decimal just moves to the end. Okay? And I end up getting 23. Now, if I want to change from millimeters to centimeters, I need to go backwards. So what's the opposite of multiplication? It's division. I need to divide by 10. And so when I divide by 10, what I basically do is I cancel a 0. So let's say it's 40 millimeters. If I divide 40 divided by 10, what I basically do is I cancel out the zeros. And what am I left with? 4 centimeters. If I look at the ruler, look at our ruler, 10, 20, 30, 40 millimeters, and I look above, and I am at 4 centimeters. So 40 millimeters equals 4 centimeters. Now, if 40 millimeters equals 4 centimeters, then what does 45 millimeters equal? Well, if I know 40 equals 4 centimeters, then 45, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. So it's in between, directly smack dab, right half in between 4 and 5 centimeters. So what's half? 0.5. So 4.5. So what happens is when I divide by 10, when I multiply by 10, I move the decimal 1 to the right. When I divide by 10, my decimal now moves 1 to the left, and I get 4.5. Okay? So what we're going to do, and what you're going to have to do in your book, is you're going to have to convert between millimeters and centimeters. So when I look at this, I have 230 millimeters. So I know that to change from millimeters to centimeters, what do I have to do? I need to divide by 10. Like I said, when I divide by 10, I basically cancel out the zeros. So therefore, how many centimeters do I get? I get 23 centimeters. Because remember, centimeters are always less than millimeters. If you look here, millimeters 10, 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter is 10 millimeters. So remember, centimeters are always less. So if you have a number that's more down in the centimeters, it's definitely wrong, because centimeters are always less than millimeters. So let's use this. So if I'm going to go from centimeters to millimeters, I need to multiply by 10. So what I'm actually going to do is when I multiply by 10, 6 times 10 gives me what? 6 times 10 is 60. So I add a 0. Anytime you multiply by 10, you add a 0. Okay? So you take away the 0 when you divide, you add the 0 when you multiply. Now in this case, what we're going to do is, again, when we shift, when we divide, we got to put our decimal in there. Okay? So I have 134 millimeters. So 134, I divide by 10. My decimal, which starts here, now shifts 1 to here. So I get 13.4. Okay? 800 millimeters. My decimal goes here. So what do I have? 80 centimeters. Okay? My number is just getting smaller by 10. Alright? Now I'm going to multiply by 10. So again, my decimal, which starts here, moves one place. So when I multiply by 10, I get 212 millimeters. So 45 millimeters, what I want to do is millimeters, I divide by 10. That decimal point goes here, 4.5. Okay, just getting smaller. Last but not least, centimeters to millimeters, I need to multiply by 10 or add a 0. So 70 centimeters is 700 millimeters. Now, all we're doing is we're just taking our numbers, and what we're doing is we are just changing them, or yeah, we're just changing the numbers so that we can change the measurements. So we know that going from centimeters to millimeters, we are converting them, going from centimeters to millimeters. When we go from centimeters to millimeters, numbers always get bigger. When we go from millimeters to centimeters, the numbers always get smaller. Okay? So, millimeters and centimeters are not that difficult. They are on your ruler. You can see them. So take a look at your ruler, because it will help you, as I have shown you on this ruler, and it will definitely help you with your conversions for sure. So you have pages to do. I suggest that you get at them. They are not that difficult. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask or watch the video again. This is Mr. Wicklum signing off.